When you believe in love too deeply, the pain of betrayal cuts twice as hard. That's how Lena's story begins. Not with romance, but with ruin. For years, she had believed that kindness was enough to keep a family together. That love could forgive any imperfection. That even a barren woman still had worth. But in the world Lena lived in, a world of quiet villages overshadowed by gleaming cities, worth was measured in children, money, and obedience. And Lena had none. Her husband left her first. 5 years of marriage, endless tests, whispers, and pitying smiles. The day the doctor told her she would never conceive, he didn't even try to comfort her. He simply said, "Then there's no point," and walked out. She went home to her parents' small apartment, carrying nothing but a suitcase and a divorce certificate. But what she found there wasn't comfort either. Her mother's eyes were full of shame. Her father's voice trembled when he spoke. "Lena, you've brought enough disgrace. You can't stay here forever. We can't feed another mouth." That night, a stranger came, a man in a gray suit with a polite smile and a contract in his hand. He spoke softly, like someone used to getting what he wanted. "Mr. and Mrs. Tran," he said, "my employer is looking for domestic staff, people who can be discreet." Lena didn't understand until she saw her father's face pale. "What kind of work?" she asked. The man smiled faintly. "The kind that doesn't allow you to ask questions." By morning, the papers were signed. Her parents didn't meet her eyes as she packed her bag again. And as the car pulled away, she realized they hadn't even said goodbye. They had sold her for a sum that would pay off their debts and buy a new roof. That was the price of their daughter's silence. The car drove for hours into the heart of the city, where glass towers scraped the sky, and no one looked twice at misery. When it stopped, Lena found herself standing before a building so tall it seemed to swallow the clouds. A black emblem above the entrance read, "Darius Corporation." Inside, everything was cold. Marble floors, glass walls, metallic voices. She was led through a side elevator to the top floor, where a secretary waited, tablet in hand. "Mr. Darius doesn't like delays," she said sharply. "Follow me." Lena obeyed. The man waiting inside the office looked nothing like the monsters from her childhood fears. He was young, mid-30s maybe, handsome in the way that frightened people into silence. Ethan Darius, CEO, billionaire, and, according to every newspaper headline, ruthless beyond reason. He didn't look up when she entered. "Name?" he asked. "Lena Tran." He finally raised his eyes, steel gray, unreadable. "Your record says you were married." "Yes." "Any children?" Her throat tightened. "No." He scribbled something in a notebook, then closed it with a quiet snap that sounded like judgment. "You'll clean the private floor. No questions, no contact with guests. If you do well, you'll be paid. If you don't, you'll disappear." Lena nodded. It was a strange relief to have her worth defined so clearly. Days bled into nights. She learned to move silently through marble halls, to avoid security cameras, to scrub floors until her hands bled. The staff whispered about their boss, that he never smiled, never touched anyone, never forgave mistakes. Some said he lived in the office, that he ate alone because he couldn't stand people. Others claimed he'd once been married, until his wife died in an accident he blamed himself for. No one knew for sure, because no one dared to ask. It happened one evening. A meeting ran late, and Lena stayed to clear the conference room. Through the glass wall, she saw him, Ethan Darius, sitting alone at the head of the table, a glass of whiskey untouched before him. The city glittered beyond the windows, but he wasn't looking at it. He was staring at nothing. Something in that emptiness mirrored her own. When she moved to leave quietly, his voice stopped her. "Do you believe in second chances?" Lena froze. I don't know, sir." "Good answer," he murmured. Then, after a pause, "What's your story?" She hesitated, then said softly, I was married. I couldn't give him children. So my family decided I wasn't worth keeping. Ethan's eyes flicked toward her, sharp, curious, wounded. And yet you're still standing, he said. From that night, something changed. He started asking her to stay late, first to deliver reports, then coffee, then simply to sit while he worked in silence. Sometimes he'd speak without looking at her, about his company, about trust, about people who lied. Other times he'd ask questions that felt like tests. What do you fear most, Lena? Being forgotten, she answered once. He'd gone quiet for a long time after that. Rumors began to spread. The staff whispered that the CEO had taken interest in a cleaner, that she must have done something unspeakable to earn it. And soon, the board noticed too. One morning, Lena was summoned. The HR director stood waiting with 2 guards. You're dismissed, she said coldly. Mr. Darius has been advised to end personal distractions. Lena felt her stomach drop. She tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Please, she whispered. I didn't do anything wrong. The director sneered. People like you never do. That's the problem. But before they could escort her out, a voice echoed down the corridor. Deep, calm, dangerous. Let her go. Ethan stood there, hands in his pockets, gaze icy. I said, let her go. The guards stepped back immediately. He walked past them and stopped beside Lena. Come with me, he said quietly. They rode the elevator in silence. When the doors opened, he led her not to the office, but to a small rooftop garden she never knew existed. The city stretched beneath them, lights shimmering like broken stars. I don't care what they think, he said finally. I've spent years surrounded by people who only wanted my power, my name. You're the first person who doesn't look at me like a headline. Lena's voice trembled. I don't understand. Why me? Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. Because you still have kindness. Even after everything weeks passed, he made her his assistant, then his confidant. Late nights turned into shared dinners. Laughter replaced silence. And for the first time in years, Ethan Darius smiled. But love, even the gentle kind, draws enemies. And one day, it found them. A scandal broke. Photos leaked. CEO involved with former cleaning staff. Headlines spread like wildfire. The board threatened to remove him. Investors withdrew. He could have denied everything. He could have saved himself. Instead, he held a press conference. And before the world, he said, Yes. She worked for me. Yes. I care for her. And if that costs me everything, then so be it. The company fell silent. So did the world. Lena watched from the back of the room, tears streaming down her face. For once, someone had chosen her, not despite her scars, but because of them. Afterward, he found her waiting outside. You've ruined your reputation, she said, voice shaking. He smiled faintly. Reputation can be rebuilt. But peace? He looked at her softly. I only found that when I met you. Months later, the dust settled. The company survived. Investors returned, some out of fear, others out of respect. Ethan rebuilt his empire, but he no longer ruled it like a fortress. And Lena, the woman who had once been sold for silence, became the quiet heart of it all. Not as a servant, but as his equal, his partner, his wife. Years later, she would look back at that day, the day her parents sold her for being useless, and realize something miraculous. They hadn't sold her future. They'd only handed her fate to someone strong enough to rewrite it. Because sometimes life takes everything from you just to make space for something greater, something real, something that finally stays. They said love would heal everything. They never warned her it could also reopen old wounds. 2 years had passed since Lena became Mrs. Darius. 2 years since the world had stopped calling her the maid who caught the CEO. Now, she was the woman who stood beside him, poised, graceful, calm. On magazine covers, they looked perfect. But perfection, like glass, hides its cracks until it shatters. At first, life felt like a dream she didn't dare wake from. The mansion no longer felt like a cage. Ethan smiled more. He laughed sometimes, a low, quiet sound that made her chest ache with warmth. She managed charity projects under his foundation, helping women who had been abandoned or sold, just like her. Each time she looked into their eyes, she saw the version of herself she once was, frightened, voiceless, but still alive. And for a while, that gave her purpose. Then came the silence, the kind that doesn't fill rooms, but hearts. Ethan began coming home later, claiming the company needed him. He stopped answering calls during meetings, stopped joining her for breakfast. When she asked if something was wrong, he said softly, "You've done nothing wrong. I'm just tired." But Lena knew that kind of tired. It wasn't exhaustion, it was distance. One night, unable to sleep, she found him in his study. He sat in the dark, papers scattered, whiskey half drunk. When she touched his shoulder, he didn't flinch. He just whispered, "I can't lose everything again." She knelt beside him. "You're not losing anything." He looked at her then, and for a brief, terrible moment, she saw a stranger behind those familiar gray eyes. "You don't understand," he said hoarsely. "They're coming for the foundation. They think we used it to cover old debts. If they're right, we could lose everything, including the people we promised to help." Over the next weeks, the press tore into them. Old rivals resurfaced. Lawyers sent threats. Lena watched the man she loved transform back into the cold CEO the world feared. He pushed her away to protect her, but it felt like being abandoned all over again. When she finally confronted him, her voice cracked. "I can stand with you through the storm, Ethan, but not if you keep shutting me out." He turned away. "I built this empire to make sure no one could hurt me again. Now the only person who can is you." The words broke something in her. Days later, she packed a small bag. Not because she stopped loving him, but because she couldn't breathe inside the silence anymore. She left a note on his desk. "When you're ready to let someone in again, you'll find me where it all began." No signature, no goodbye. For months, Lena disappeared from the world. She rented a small apartment near the old district, the same street where she'd first been sold. Irony, she thought, that freedom would lead her back here. She spent her days volunteering at a women's shelter, helping others rebuild what life had stolen from them. And though her heart ached every time she looked at the door, she told herself she'd made the right choice. Some loves needed distance to survive. Then, one evening, the shelter door opened, and there he was. Ethan. No suit, no armor, just a man who looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then he said quietly, "You once told me your biggest fear was being forgotten. Mine was losing control, and I let that fear destroy everything we built." She stared at him, tears rising. "Why are you here?" He reached into his coat and pulled out a folder, thick with papers. "The board cleared us. The accusations were false, but none of it matters if you're not beside me." She shook her head. "Ethan, love isn't about saving me or saving you. It's about learning not to run every time it hurts." He stepped closer. "I know. And that's why I'm here, not to ask for forgiveness, but to ask for another chance to try again. Properly, as your equal, not your savior." Lena searched his face, and for the first time, she didn't see a CEO. She saw the man who once sat in silence, broken, asking her if she believed in second chances. And just like then, she whispered, "I don't know." Then, softer, "But maybe we can find out together." Months later, they reopened the foundation, not as a company branch, but as an independent trust in both their names. No headlines, no press, just quiet work that mattered. Ethan still carried his demons. Lena still carried her scars. But now, they carried them side by side. Because sometimes, love doesn't end with happily ever after. Sometimes it begins again, in the wreckage, in forgiveness, in the choice to stay. And so, the woman they sold and the man who once owned everything finally learned what it meant to belong. Not to the world, not to power, but to each other. Time changes faces, softens voices, and teaches even the proudest hearts how to kneel. 7 years had passed since Lena returned to Ethan. 7 years since they rebuilt their lives, brick by brick, choice by choice. The world no longer called her the woman he saved. They called her the woman who saved him back. And maybe that was true, but what they didn't see were the quiet mornings, the coffee left untouched, the letters half-written, the memories that never stopped echoing. Because healing isn't a destination, it's a daily decision to keep going. The Darius Foundation had grown beyond anything they'd imagined. It wasn't just a charity now, it was a movement. Shelters across the country bore Lena's name, offering education, jobs, and homes to women once forgotten. People asked her how she did it. She always gave the same answer: because someone once believed I still had worth. But even as she spoke, there was one wish she had never voiced aloud. One emptiness she had learned to live beside, like a quiet shadow. She still couldn't have children. One rainy evening, Ethan found her in the nursery room they'd built years ago, a room that had never been used. Tiny toys still lined the shelves, untouched and dusted with time. She sat by the window, staring at the rain. He didn't say a word. He just sat beside her. After a while, she whispered, "Do you ever think we were meant to be parents?" Ethan's hand found hers. "I think we already are. Just not in the way we imagined." She smiled faintly, eyes glistening. "I know. But sometimes I wonder what our love might look like, if it had a face, a laugh, a heartbeat." He pulled her close. "Then maybe we'll find it. Not by blood, but by choice." Weeks later, she received a letter from one of their shelters. It was from a girl named Mai, 16, found abandoned at a train station with nothing but a backpack and a sketchbook. Lena read the words again and again, the trembling handwriting, the quiet plea. "I don't need money, I just want to feel safe." Something in her chest tightened. She showed the letter to Ethan that night. When he finished reading, he didn't say anything. He just nodded once. "Let's bring her home." Mai came with guarded eyes and a silence that felt familiar. She barely spoke for weeks. Lena didn't push her. She knew what it was like to build trust one heartbeat at a time. Ethan at first kept his distance, afraid perhaps of breaking something fragile. But one night, he found Mai sitting alone on the balcony, sketching the skyline. When she noticed him watching, she said quietly, "People up there must feel small when they look down." He smiled. "People up there forget they were ever small." That was the first time she smiled back. Seasons changed. Laughter returned to the house. Soft, unexpected, real. Mai began calling Lena Mom when she thought no one could hear. And one morning, she slipped a folded paper onto Ethan's desk. It was a drawing, a man, a woman, and a girl holding hands under the city lights. Above it, a single line. "The family I wasn't born into, but found anyway." Ethan stared at it for a long time. Then he framed it and hung it in his office. The only picture that ever made him cry. Years later, on the day Mai graduated from university, Lena and Ethan sat side by side in the audience. When Mai crossed the stage, radiant and strong, Lena felt something inside her finally settle. This was the life she was meant to build. Not the one she lost, but the one she chose again and again. After the ceremony, Mai hugged them both. "Thank you," she whispered, "for finding me." Lena smiled, tears shining. "No, sweetheart," she said softly. "You found us." That night, as the city lights flickered below, Ethan wrapped his arms around her and whispered, "Do you remember the night I asked if you believed in second chances?" Lena nodded. "You never stopped asking, did you?" He smiled. because every day with you still feels like one. And so it ended, not with fire or fury, but with peace. A woman once sold for silence had built a home full of laughter. A man who once ruled the world with fear had learned to lead with love. And together, they'd built something unbreakable, not a dynasty, not an empire, but a legacy, made of forgiveness, compassion, and the courage to begin again.